So welcome everyone to our Women's Earth and Climate Action Network event, Indigenous Women from North America, Turtle Island, Defending Land, Water, Biodiversity, and Our Global Climate. This event is being held parallel to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And we are on the ground here in New York with Indigenous women leaders globally. Those of us who are online are not necessarily in New York, but the WeCan team is in New York, and we've been attending sessions and participating in events and hosting different sessions in person. My name is Osprey Oriel Lake, and I'm the founder and executive director of WeCan. And today we're going to be hearing from an incredible group of women leaders who are fighting every day to protect and defend the earth, the sacred, the climate, and their rights and communities. They'll be sharing with us their frontline struggles, as well as their visions and strategies for shaping a healthy and equitable world. And we're really, really honored to organize this program today with these amazing leaders. And I'm going to be introducing them in the order that they're going to speak, and then just making a few more contextualizing comments, and then we'll hear from them. First, we're going to be hearing from Errol Deringer. She is at the Basca Chippewa First Nation. She's the executive director of Indigenous Climate Action in Turtle Island, or so-called Canada. Then we'll be hearing from Dr. Crystal Cavalier. She's Okanichi Band of the Saponi Nation. She's co-founder of 7 Directions of Service from Turtle Island, USA. And then we'll be hearing from Tarahauska, who's Couchiching First Nation. She's a tribal attorney and founder of GNU Collective, also from Turtle Island, USA. Then we'll be hearing from Monique Verden from the Huma Nation. She's the WeCan, we're very honored to have her, WeCan Food Sovereignty Program Coordinator in the Gulf South. And she is also the Director of Land, Memory Bank, and Seed Exchange here in Turtle Island, USA. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Jadon Cornstalk. She's a citizen of Little Traverse Bay Bands of Ottawa Indians. She's the Director of Water is Life Festival. And she is also part of the Indigenous Women's Treaty Alliance that WeCan is really honored to facilitate here in Turtle Island, USA. And we'll be hearing more about that shortly. I think it's really good to ask how we all as women can connect more deeply in our defense and protection of Mother Earth in the face of escalating climate crises, dangerous economic structures, environmental racism, and rights violations. And clearly, we can't win these struggles on our own. And so we really need to strengthen our relationships and efforts together. And today we're hearing from Indigenous women who are really drawing a red line to protect and defend Mother Earth, all species, and the very web of life. And we're here to really stand with them. And speaking of the web of life, I also wanted just to take a minute to invite our non-human relatives to be with us today. The trees, our beautiful oceans and rivers, mountains and animals of our beautiful planet, and know that those ancestors also are with us today. At WeCan, we're really strong advocates of rights-based approaches to solutions, from Indigenous rights to women's rights and all of their diversity to nature's rights. And I think it's really important to highlight that violence against the earth is directly linked to the violence against women, and that patriarchy, racism, colonization, and capitalism are all based in great part upon power over and exploitation of women, the land, Indigenous peoples, and peoples of color around the world. And these are really daunting challenges. And yet Indigenous women are making a significant difference in changing our current destructive trajectory. And we really need to support the power, leadership, and visibility of these Indigenous women at every level of decision-making and funding and resource opportunity. And WeCan has been really honored to be in the territories and lands of many of the presenters today, advocating, taking action, and standing in solidarity with their sisters as they lead key efforts to protect their homelands. And in each of these ongoing struggles, what I see is that these women's voices just shine so boldly with dignity, wisdom, love, and strength in the midst of really ongoing challenges that have been going on since colonization. And these women's voices are rising to say that colonization must end, Sacrifice zones and environmental racism must end. And violence against women's bodies by extractive industries must end. And the desecration of Indigenous sacred sites and violations against Indigenous rights must end. The destruction of the earth and water must end. This is the red line. And these women are offering many solutions. And one that is so important to all of us is to remember our inseparable connection to Mother Earth and how Indigenous women can really remind us of this in everything of their worldview and the knowledge that they're sharing. This is a solution. And so with that, I'm so honored to hear from our panelists, and we're going to first hear from Ariel Deringer. You have the floor, Ariel, and thank you so much for being with us.
Eklanete, Dene Sloklaneta, Ariel Tsaekwe Hushe, Deranger Betsy, and Hesli. My name is Ariel Tsaekwe Deranger, and I'm a member of the Athabasca. I'm going to pause this while I do my introduction. I'm a member of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, which is located in the Treaty 8 territories of Northern Alberta in so-called Canada. And I'm also a mother and an avid pet owner, and I currently reside in Amiskwaciwâskahikan, also known as Edmonton, in Treaty 6 territory, also in so-called Alberta. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of Indigenous Climate Action, and I'm just so grateful to be here. So thank you so much to We Can and all of the organizers to help make this event, and thank you to all the different speakers that will be speaking after me. I think that this is a really important subject, and given that everyone is at the Permanent Forum, it's a very interesting time. I remember my first times going to the Permanent Forum as a young, it was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now, the first time I went to the Permanent Forum. And I helped to create and I got to actually witness some of the last moments for the negotiations of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and participate as a youth participant, including making interventions. And so this work that's being done to advance the rights of Indigenous peoples is incredibly critical to where we are, and is also part of what drives my work within my own organization called Indigenous Climate Action, which is a climate justice organization north of the Medicine Line in so-called Canada that is Indigenous-led with a primary function to disrupt colonial processes while nurturing the capacities of our communities to create that something new that is driven by the values of our communities. We are an Indigenous woman-led organization that is driven by a steering committee of largely Indigenous women as well. But I think in the context of understanding why Indigenous rights are so important, we have to contextualize what our populations mean globally. And while we're only 5% of the global population, we represent the diversity of culture in our languages and our ways of being. And our lands and territories represent over 22% of the world's land surface. And within that is 80% of the world's biodiversity. And another fact that we don't often talk about is the conservation movement is quite dominated by white folks and white liberal, ENGOs, but the actuality is 85% of the world's protected and conservation areas are within or adjacent to Indigenous lands and territories. And this is not by accident. So getting back to a little bit about myself, I come from the largest contiguous treaty territory in so-called Canada, which is called Treaty Number 8. And I grew up traditionally on the land with my parents, and we lived in an area in northern Saskatchewan near Uranium City. And our family was forcibly removed by armed security in 1979 for the exploration and the development of uranium in northern Saskatchewan. And that led to my first entrance into the world by being displaced from my traditional territory and forced into urban centers where my parents continue to struggle. My dad is a residential school survivor and a survivor of medical experimentation at a tuberculosis hospital for 6 years as a child. Our stories are difficult, but the reality is our people also have fought for our rights. And we've fought within the halls of UN, and we've fought within the systems of our colonial state governments for that recognition because we have the knowledge that is necessary to mitigate the climate crisis, which we are all facing today. The reality is that the earth is out of balance. We are out of balance with ourselves and with Mother Earth. And in order to address the climate crisis, we must restore our relationships with Mother Earth and with each other to address the imbalances in all aspects of our lives. And one of the ways that I was taught about this when we talk about women is that for so long, systems of colonialism and patriarchy have imposed their values into our communities, which has created not just this imbalance in GHGs in the atmosphere, but this imbalance of the roles and responsibilities of the masculine and the feminine. And we must not just be talking about addressing GHGs, but we must be addressing the imbalances of the roles and responsibilities we hold as Indigenous women in our roles and responsibilities in the climate crisis. The reality is women are disproportionately affected by climate change more than others. And empowering women will be a significant factor in meeting the climate challenge. So when I look at myself and I look at the places where I come from, which were articulated by treaty negotiations that we all know have been broken over and over again, the reality is our communities actually only have 0.2% of the land, and the other 99.8% in so-called Canada is under government control. This has amounted to stolen land. This has amounted to white supremacy, colonial violence, ongoing land theft, and ongoing Indigenous genocide. And we can see this through the anthropogenic footprint that came with colonization. I'm hearing myself echo. So if people can mute, that would be great.
Can people mute? Can people please?
Sorry, it was just really distracting. I can hear my own echo back, so yeah. So, and when we talk about the anthropogenic footprint and what it means to Indigenous peoples, we can look in my territory, this is what we're fighting. Colonial systems have imposed these structures to exploit the land for everything that it is, including the exploitation of the peoples that live there. In my territory, we are fighting the largest industrial project on planet Earth, which is the Alberta tar sands, which poisons the water systems, which is poisoning our traditional food sources, which is poisoning the air and is creating havoc on our communities. Recently, the largest spill of tar sands tailings, or the byproduct of tar sands, was released into our ecosystems and groundwater systems and has resulted in enormous impacts on our way of being once again. And again, we did not have a part in creating these structures, and women are the most impacted by this structure because we have seen what this also includes: man camps. We've seen that with the imposition of new industrialized development in our area that was not developed for centuries, suddenly we have increases of domestic violence. We have increases of women sex trafficking. We have increased incidences of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. In my community alone, the community of Fort Chipewyan, a township of 1,200 people, we have had 6 murdered and missing Indigenous women in the last 15 years. This is an astronomical number in comparison to what we see in other places. So for me, I think about things like tar sands, WTF. What is this? What are we allowing when we allow colonial values and systems that degrade the roles and responsibilities of women and uplift systems of patriarchy, capitalism, and the extractivism of our lands and territories? We are seeing the destruction. And this is not just happening here in so-called Canada or Turtle Island. This is an epidemic across the globe. European empires have proliferated the planet and are destroying the lifeways of Indigenous peoples the world over. And the reality is that the climate crisis is not about GHGs. It's caused by colonialism. And Indigenous peoples are the solution. I'm going to pass this video because I don't want to do it. There are many ways that our communities are countering this. And the reality is our voices and solutions are critical. That's what the Permanent Forum was created for, to advance our rights, not just as something to talk about and to romanticize, but because our solutions are critical across the board. We've seen how our lifeways and culture can change economics. We've seen how our lifeways and cultures can change the happiness of our community when it is embraced and it is brought forward. And we've seen time and time again how the women in our communities are leading the transitions for the restoration of languages, the restoration of our traditional food sources, the restoration of our crafting, with a huge movement that's going across North America on traditional tan hiding or hide tanning that I absolutely love. I actually have a moose hide in my freezer that I'm going to do this summer. And these are beautiful ways that show how our traditional cultures, our values that are being upheld by the women in the center of our communities are critical for our lifeways, our food and sustenance, but also our mental health and well-being, and a part of that restoring the balances that we all collectively need. And yet we are continually met with frontline insults and violence driven by the state and colonial violence that want to continue to take our land, to harm our women, to harm our children over and over again. We are leaders, and we have been leaders in conserving the environment for so long. Our knowledge and unique experience is what's necessary for us to drive the solutions to the climate crisis. We are the center of the wheel of life. We are the heartbeat of our people. We are not just a home, but we are the community, and we are our nations. And we have to do this because we can no longer stand the ongoing violence that we see with the epidemics of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit. We can no longer accept that this is the status quo. We must not only fight for the restitution and recognition of our lands and territories through the land back movements and the rights of nature, but we also must fight for the women whose lives have been taken to allow these expansive and destructive projects to continue and proliferate our homelands, our territories, and our lifeways. Enough is enough. Masicho. Hi, hi. And I will try to stop.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ariel, for that really powerful presentation. And before we move to the next panelist, I just want to say, here on the ground, we've been in a lot of sessions at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and the women are really echoing your words of just like, enough is enough. We are at such a brink with the last water, the last forests, and that the women are the ones who are the backbone of these movements. So I just really thank you for your powerful words, and to also reflect upon the fact that the criminalization and the violence against women is also increasing as we see as resources, if you will, the land, the water, I don't like that word, resources are becoming more and more scarce because of what humans are doing. This violence is increasing and the threats and criminalization is growing. And it's a big discussion. So thank you for bringing that forward. And with that, we're going to hand the floor to Dr. Crystal Cavalier. Please go ahead, Crystal, you've got the floor. Thank you.
Oh, Mekudamin Chin Kiyohe, Nahal Pipi say, Mima Crystal, Mima Okanichi Siponi Watiwa. So, Errol, that was a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much for setting the tone. And thank you, Wecan and Osprey and Ashley and Catherine and everybody for allowing me to be on this panel with these incredible women. I'm really honored to be here. And I'm really excited and honored to tell you the story about the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the things that we have been experiencing here in the Southeast. A lot of our Southeast tribal nations, they're not federally recognized, so we are in a different standing because we don't get some of those federal protections, such as being able to be consulted by the federal governments. So we have to take the private citizen route and voice our opinions and get consent and all of those things. So I'm going to share a little bit about the MVP. So hold on one second while I share my slides. Sorry, I can't
No, don't worry about it. Just take your time, relax. We have all been there. And just to say in the chat, we're also going to be putting links to the different women's organizations so that you can directly support them and learn more about them. There, I did commercial for you while you got going. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the MVP, so Mountain Valley Pipeline. This is a 42-inch diameter pipeline that is slated to come through West Virginia, and then it will change to the MVP Southgate in North Carolina. And so this pipeline is going through shale. It is going through very steep mountains of the Appalachian Trail, a lot of Monacan and Occaneechi burial mounds, which I will show you next. So this is a photo of our burial mound located in Bent Mountain along the pipeline route. And these mounds were our ancestors' graves, and they're often contained generations of our ancestors within one mound. And it's been so many mounds that have been desecrated, and it is equivalent to, you know, digging up or decimating an entire graveyard. And the people or our relatives who passed were often initially buried where they fell. And then later our relatives would return to dig the bones up and place them in mounds with other ancestors during our ceremonial times. And these mounds were marked with ceremonial stones, as you can see in our pictures. And over time, they grew to, 15 to 25 feet. And so these are some of the problems that we have faced dealing with this pipeline. You can see in the back, there's this orange, dividing line that the pipeline had put up to separate it. And at first, when the pipeline was going through, they were actually trying to go through the burial mound. And since these mountains are now owned by private citizens, it's up to the citizen to protect those mounds. And so we were able to, the homeowner was able to reroute the pipeline to just a little bit on the east of the mound. And they were actively, they actively call our mounds just a big pile of rocks. A rock pile is what they reported in their environmental assessment report. And so there are many of these mounds, hundreds, thousands of these mounds all across the tops of the Appalachian. And, these are the things that we're fighting here in North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. And so we've been fighting this pipeline for about 10 years, the Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate for about 5 years. And we've had some successes. We've also had some not so good successes, but we recently got a success 2 weeks ago from the West Virginia courts to where they denied their water quality permit, which was, huge. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. But that was a huge win. And of course, we're also fighting laws and congressional politics and permitting reforms. And it's been very tiring and taxing because here on the Southeast, our people have been, they've been silenced for so long that they do not like to stand and speak up and speak out. And so my husband and I, when we co-founded 7 Directions of Service, we really had to do a lot of coaching, having a lot of workshops, helping people understand that it's okay to speak out, and then also working in community where it takes time to build this trust with community members and just building a movement. And that's what we've been really doing, is building a movement. And like Errol said, there's been a lot of attacks on women that have been leading these movements. We've seen a lot of division now between federally recognized tribes and state tribes. And we all think it is just a ploy because they want to really destroy the environment, because they see a lot of people standing up and stopping these pipelines or extractive industries. We really see a change in the language because now they're talking about clean energy, but they're still talking about extractive sites such as lithium mines and now copper mines. And here in North Carolina and Virginia, we have a large lithium and uranium store that's under the ground. And we're seeing that people are pushing these things forward and they're repeating terms and talking points, but not really understanding what's really at stake. North Carolina now has a lot of, they don't have a lot of protections at the county levels. So we see a lot of corporations that come into counties, such as the Toyota lithium plant that they're making Toyota batteries. for these electric cars, and they're doing a lot of extractive industries. They're putting semiconductor facilities in. We see a lot of wood pellet plants that's been coming in. And also, we also see a lot of attacks on they're called CAFOs, but I think they stand for caged animal facility operations that are really harming the communities. There's no regulations on this, and the regulatory agencies that we have in North Carolina, they're not really standing up. So it's relying on us citizens and environmental organizations to take a stand and say, hey, do you see what's happening to our communities? And so I really do appreciate this, Osprey, to be able to speak on this at an international level, because what happens here happens all across the world, especially in Indigenous communities where we see a lot of people being silenced. I also work with an organization called Namity, and they work in Africa, Myanmar, India, and we are seeing a change now to where a lot of government agencies are not willing to stand up or work with their Indigenous people. And it's a real travesty. And we're seeing a lot of attacks on women with the missing, murdered Indigenous women. We have a really big problem here in North Carolina that we've been working on. We don't have the data that other states have. Like North Carolina does not have a database. They don't track how many women or girls or two-spirits have been missing. And we're still fighting a very conservative government. We really had a shakeup in politics to where now they're changing a lot of laws that limits what women, girls, and two-spirits can and cannot do, especially our young warriors that are in the high school levels. And so those are just some issues that we have seen here in North Carolina and Virginia, and we are speaking out against this. We're really speaking out now against President Biden because he can stop all of this. He campaigned 3 years ago on climate change, and I really believed him that he was going to really stand up and do these swift climate actions and stop fossil fuels and help move the United States forward. And we've seen time and time again to where he just keeps pushing forward these fossil fuel projects, and now breaking promises, just really a detriment to the community and environments all across Turtle Island. And I really appreciate this, Osprey, and we can. And with that, I'm going to close out. So Elewa, thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, Crystal, and also the incredible leadership you've shown in this MVP fight that has just gone on. And we know what happened at the end of the year last year and the huge fight that went on to stop the MVP. And all of your incredible efforts in your organization. And it goes on and on. And thank you for also sharing with us some of the gender lens of what's happening with the communities that where you're living. And as Era also said, this issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women and two-spirit people is just atrocious and so underreported. And it's another horrific violation that really has to be addressed. And I just want to make one more comment before we hand it to Tara, which is one of the things that's happened here on the ground in New York during the UN Permanent Forum is there's been several really powerful sessions on mining and this whole issue of, moving off of fossil fuels. And now let's just go mine for all of these renewables. And as we know, that's back on Indigenous lands, not respecting free, prior, informed consent. So there's a lot of organizing and outrage, as there should be, around, the system hasn't changed. Now we'll just make money in the same system, not changing business as usual, and harms to the same BIPOC communities and Indigenous people. So just to tie in that this is part of the discussion that's here. So thank you for mentioning that. And with that, I'm so honored to have Tara Hauska here with us. Thank you, Tara.
Hey, Buju. My name is Tara. I'm Bear Clan from Kuching First Nation in the Treaty 3 territory, and super honored to be here with all of you. Deeply appreciate the continued work of We Can and how hard you work, Osprey, to bring the voices of women into these spaces. It's just so incredibly needed. I'm a lawyer by training, and I guess, more of a land defender by practice these days, have been for a number of years. Founded a group called GNU Collective. We're Indigenous women and Two-Spirit led, and heavily focused on land defense and the critical importance of reconnection with nature in a very real way, which is, I'm calling you right now from coming out of a sugar bush camp where we've been maple sapping for the last few weeks. It's very cold and snowy and sleety today, so the trees are not running, and it's a good time for us to boil and to take a little break and gonna get some showers. I'm also a new mom, and that's been an incredible gift in so many ways. It's also been the I think the manifestation of these efforts and energy we put towards protecting the earth. We talk about future generations, and I sit in lodges and we tell the stories about, you know, our ways and how they got to be, and you become finite in that space and think about those connectivities between yourself and what's to come. And I've got this little girl in front of me that's right there, you know, and it's just so amazing to experience that gift. And it also is, you know, I think any parent across the globe is, you know, especially those that are engaged in this struggle against climate crisis, recognize some of the difficulties our children will face, and, you know, the realities of what it looks like to grow up in such a time of uncertainty. You know, to be a person like where we're from, ice is a huge part of our reality. We are, you know, very much a cold place on this planet, and have a culture around ice fishing and, you know, that long period of cold, and it's changing so rapidly. Even in my lifetime, it has changed so dramatically, and I think about that for my daughter and what that means. You know, is she going to be able to experience that? You know, what's it going to look like for her to live in a little, you know, she going to experience living in a little town on the ice? I don't know. But I echo the sentiments of the women who spoke before, and I'm sure the women who will speak after. You know, this fight we're engaged in, this I think resistance in love that we're pushing for so hard, you know, and it's in all different ways, in different capacities, in different forums, whether it's the United Nations or the feds or state or, you know, our own nations. You know, trying to bring the voice of nature, trying to bring the voice of balance, the voice of reason into deciding to destroy the earth. You know, what does that mean? What are we tasked with, and how do we keep ourselves whole during that effort? You know, as we see these fights, you know, I hear the MVP fight. I think about how I've spent the last 7 years fighting Line 3. The pipeline was built, and it was very painful, and it's now leaking into our watershed, into our wild rice. I know the beautiful resistance that happened there of thousands of people from all over Turtle Island and beyond, you know, coming to this place in our territory to protect the rice, to stand up for the rivers, for the water. I know that love that was so strong and so strongly felt. And the systems of repression that continue on. I mean, there's still quite a few of us who are still facing legal charges from that. I know the criminalization of folks who are standing up for human rights, who are standing up for life. I know I have a number of friends who are incarcerated in various struggles, and I think part of this equation of this fight we're engaged in to protect the earth, the critical need of making space for human rights defenders, for not just kind of like romanticizing in this idealistic, version of whatever protest is supposed to be, but the very real, sentiment of, if you say that we are at a point where the world is on fire, what does that mean? What does that really mean? Are you going to stand by while your relative is destroyed in front of you, violently destroyed in front of you? Are we violent for putting ourselves in front of the machines? Is it an act of violence to do so? And the assassinations and the incarcerations and repression of human rights defenders all over. I mean, I've been privileged enough to stand with a number of folks and to hear their struggles from all over the globe, and seeing this, I think, this moment in time where human beings are deciding what we're going to do. Are we going to keep living a way of life that is, and this is only explicit to just a few of the population, right? Most of the world is actually not contributing to climate crisis in the way that some of us are. But are we going to continue down this path? Are we going to scorch the earth? Are we going to destroy ourselves? And are we going to criminalize those who speak for the rivers in the midst of that? Are we going to criminalize those who believe in something more, who recognize our finite time in this space, who recognize this belongs to somebody else who hasn't been born yet? This belongs to my daughter, it belongs to Ariel's children, it belongs to all of our children, but it belongs to their children too, right? And it belongs to the two-legged, the four-legged, the winged, the fish that you mentioned, Osprey. I mean, I think those have been the constant witnesses in every fight I've ever been part of. Is nature, is watching the trees, watching the animals, watching. What have they seen? They've seen human beings fighting each other again and again and again, and now they're seeing this fight for our literal survival. We're fighting each other to survive. That said, I think there's so much hope and there's so much love and joy to be had. I know even as we reach these scientific tipping points, there is still so much care and empathy and joy as we try to treat each other in the way that we envision. We build the world that we want. That's been most of what Venu has been up to the last few years since the pipeline was built, is long-term land stewardship, land back efforts, building the world that we want to see. I think there is a future that is just and equitable, and most of all, kind to each other. We're just, we have to do what we can to build it, and arm ourselves with sage and sweetgrass and love and care and all that badass energy I see from so many frontlines folks all over the globe. But yeah, Miigwech, thanks for the space and the time, and we fight on.
Wow, thank you so much, Tara, for those really wise words, and all of the experiences that you carry and share with us. And I know so much inspiration of your leadership on line 3 that is carried over to line 5, and that same company and the struggle, as you say, the fight goes on. And also just to reflect on how I'm glad more and more of us are talking about the fights that we're in, but also the world we want to build, and somehow like balancing between these struggles we're in, because we're going to keep standing up. Like, you can't let that last forest and that last water get polluted. At the same time, I love hearing that you're, in this project and what GNU Collective is doing right now. It's really healing to hear. So we ourselves can also stay balanced, as we do this work. So it's really exciting to hear what you're doing. And we put your information in the chat for people to follow along and support. And again, just for everyone, all of these women are doing incredible work, and we hope that you will look at the links and support and see the work that they're doing and how valuable it is. So thank you for that. And I'm going to hand the floor over to Monique now. Monique Verdon, you have the floor.
Thanks so much. I'm incredibly honored to be in this virtual circle, and just recognizing, how no matter where we are, we're all facing the same kinds of oppressive histories that are our current realities. And I also want to acknowledge that today is the anniversary of the BP drilling disaster, which happened in 2010 on April 20th. And for 87 days, they could not figure out how to stop the sweet crude from leaking into the Gulf of Mexico. And how we witnessed this kind of every day. We would turn the news on, and instead of watching the weather, we were watching where the currents of the Gulf of Mexico were pushing the oil to. And that just horrifying reality that summer as our shrimp season was just opening here in the Delta. I'm Monique Verdon. I'm part of the Homa Nation, and our territory is found between the Atchafalaya and the Mississippi River, which are actually part of the same river system, which connects us to 41% of the continental so-called United States, and 2 Canadian provinces drain into this waterway. And I think that, I think of home as being this magical in between land and water, salt and fresh, a power point for the planet where water comes to be purified and where it's connecting to the ocean. And if we're talking about the climate, we have to talk about the ocean systems and our water systems. And I was just doing a brief, catch up on the statistics of Louisiana before the session today, and just wanted to share from the United States Energy Information Administration that 1/3 of natural gas is produced, and produced or the reserves are in Louisiana. We have 14 refineries, which is 1/5 of the so-called United States refining capacity. In 2021, 52% of the nation's liquefied natural gas exports were shipped out of Louisiana, as well as 13% of coal. New Orleans, better known as Bulbuncha, place of many languages or place of many tongues, as the Choctaw call it, is they're responsible for 1/3 of the largest coal exports. And yet we are, on the other list, 47th in healthcare, 48th in the nation in education, 47th in economy, 49th in the natural environment, 50th in crime and corrections. And I always like to kind of orient when we're talking about, the Mississippi River Delta here, that where the plantations once sat, the petrochemical plants now sit. And sometimes I introduce myself as saying, oh yeah, I live in Cancer Alley, just north of the dead zone, because those are the ways that our homelands have been branded because of this legacy of extraction. I'm really fortunate to know so many amazing women in my life, and also really fortunate to be in relationship with We Can, and for all of the friendships that have come through this network, and other networks, including the Indigenous Environmental Network. This image here is part of a series of work I've been doing called the Lost Treasure Maps. We're losing land here in South Louisiana at one of the fastest rates on the planet. The statistic is that every 90 minutes, a football field is lost from our coastlands. And my elder here, Viviane Hotard, who has since moved on into the spirit world, but a dear friend and one of my wise teachers, and she is from the territory that is known as the Yakni-Shudo, this big country that's found between the Atchafalaya and Mississippi. And Point Barre, which is where this map is where she's from. She's actually, this photograph I took of her, where she grew up in Point Barre, and you can see the pipeline cutting through. And this is one of the first places, actually the first place in coastal Louisiana where oil was drilled for in the early 20th century. And Viviane and other relatives were pushed off of these territories at that time because of oil and gas coming in. And we've had over 10,000 miles of canals and pipelines that have been put through these coastal wetlands since that time, which is, in addition to sea level rising globally, this has exasperated the land loss that we're experiencing. So this is from the United States Geological Survey, I think, as well, or the Army Corps of Engineers. This is life in the red zone. You know, they're telling us by 2050, all of this land that's in red will be uninhabitable. And we're really facing this like forced migration in a new way. I mean, our people were pushed to the ends of the bayous. I always say that we kind of dodged the trail of tears by going deep into the Delta. And then nobody wanted our land until oil and gas was found, or land and waters until oil and gas was found there. But now this retreat from the coast is very real. And we're recognizing that our migrations to northern territories or figuring out a retreat and return is really what we're up against. I always love to reference this photograph of my elders. This was taken in the 1920s in a place called Point au Chien, or Point au Chien, depending on who you ask, Point of the Oaks or Point of the Dog. And my two great grandmothers stand in the front line. And just to think about how quickly life changes. And also to think of Tara and the sugar bush right now, and how the connections to our land, the connections to our way of life, how that is the secret to survival. And so this image always grounds me. And at current times, I'm working with my relatives in Grand Bois to build a replica house of this ancestral house, and to plant medicine gardens, and to also outfit it with solar systems, so that in times of emergency, like when we have a hurricane, which we seem to have one every couple of years now as they're getting stronger and more frequent, that this will be a safe place for folks to have as a battery charging station, as well as a place to distribute supplies. This again is Point au Chien, and this kind of land loss that's happened in just the last 100 years, really. And this web of pipelines, right? I mean, we're not only are we up against the refineries that are already there, but now carbon capture sequestration. Louisiana is targeted because we have the geological formations that are primed for it. And also the expansion of liquefied natural gas here. We already have a number of facilities, but in the next coming years, they're wanting to expand to almost 12 facilities, one of the largest in the world being here in South Louisiana, where again, we're losing land at one of the fastest rates on the planet. And to say that our retreat from these coasts is not, you cannot run from climate change. And so I'm working with a network of Indigenous women through the Oklahina Ikish Holo, the people of the Sacred Medicine Trail, to find safe places to retreat to for people and for our plants, to be able to find medicine and food sovereignty and to stay connected, and also to remain and reclaim in the places that we love, even if they are turning into open water. It's still home. So thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you so much, Monique, for walking us through what's happening in your territories. It's really heartbreaking just to see the devastation, and also, the inspiration that you're bringing with the collective of Indigenous farmers and, continuing to have a dream and a vision of how to live there, given these really harsh conditions. And also just to reflect again on how, for those of you who are listening that are not from the United States, it's often hard to understand what is happening in the Gulf South or in Cancer Alley, as Monique was talking about. And it is because it is on Indigenous lands and Black communities. This is where this harm is going on. It's not happening in white communities. It's happening in low-income communities, Indigenous lands, brown and Black communities. And so this linkage between where the harm is happening and the extraction is happening is very on purpose. And that's why so many of us are talking about intersectional movement building, to really understand that if we're really fighting environmental racism and understand the root causes of how these things happen, then there would not be sacrifice zones and sacrifice people where these terrible projects are going on. And so that's why we really need to link arms together and understand how these systems of oppression are united. And Cancer Alley is one of the big examples of many, many that we could call out. So thank you for that. And also sharing some family photos. It's really powerful just to see your ancestors. Thank you for that. And now I'd love to hear from Janan Cornstalk. You have the floor, Janan.
All right. Ani Buju, Janan Cornstalk, Nadishkaz, Wakanak Singh, Odawa, Kes Corridor, and Donjaba, Mashike, and Dodum, Sin Mishike Kwe. What I said in my language is, my name is Janan Cornstalk. I am a citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. I am Turtle Clan, and my Indian name is Stone Turtle Woman. So I was advised by one of my spiritual advisors to use my Indian name. So I invite my relatives in, and the creator who recognizes me by that name. So as well, if you, I'm going to light a smudge and ask my ancestors and the creators to come with me as I speak on behalf of them and my future generations, etc. And the other beings that I share this planet with, winged, four-legged, other two-legged, etc., the crawlers, all of that. So, and I am going to say a couple words to the creator. Thank you for everything that you do for me. Everything you do for me is good. Everything that you do for me is great. And I ask that you would lift up all these thoughts and feelings and words and things that we as women do in our communities to protect and deflect and to bring awareness to all of these things that we see, to protect Shikaki McQuay and our future generations and our relatives and those that are even non-native. I ask that you would walk with each and every one of us and bless these women at Weekend that have been instrumental in the conduit to bring us all together and to raise our voices and all of these things that cause great harm and things in our community. I ask that you would bless each and every one of these women and the communities that they come from, their children, their grandchildren, and their relatives and their clans as far as they go. And anyone that is within the sound of my voice, that you could bless them as well in their communities and those things that they do. If there's anything that I left out, I ask that you would take care of it for me. Bless my mother today, who is maybe walking on soon, Mary Jo Curry. I ask that you would bless her, and my father today, and my grandchildren and my children and my relatives. And I ask that you would have my relatives walk beside me as I talk about these very important things. Again, if I left anything else, I ask that you would take care of them for me. Miigwech. Thank you for letting me do that. Yeah, like I said, my name is Janan Cornstalk. I am a citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. This is my map, and I live up here in the state of Michigan. So we take our shoot. Yeah, we are located, my tribe is located on the Little Traverse Bay in Michigan, kind of like between Harbor Springs and Petoskey. And where the Enbridge Line 5 is under the Straits of Mackinac that the Enbridge constructed, my tribe and the other 5 tribes in the Chippewa-Ottawa Resource Authority have been very active and challenging Enbridge building a tunnel. And for us, it is a treaty issue because we come from a fishing community. We have tribal fishermen, and that is the way that they make their, that is the ways they live. That's the way that they sustain. They bring those fish into our communities and, you know, supply some to area restaurants, things like that. So that, you know, and I don't have the map with me, but there are a lot of anomalies with the Enbridge Line 5 that they don't necessarily talk about. When they do their spins and their commercials, etc., they don't talk about these things. They put all this positive, a positive spin on, you know, how safe they are and things like that. But I know otherwise. And Kalamazoo, Michigan is an example of that. And they didn't find out about that hours after it was already leaking. There was a citizen on the ground near the river that saw that it was like bubbling up, and that's how they found out about it. So I heard lots and lots of good things from these other women. Oh yeah, there was something that I wanted to share, and this is kind of like how I think about the work that I do. And I'm sure that all of us have kind of like felt like this at, so, let me see if I can do this. Okay, hold on, okay, go. Or maybe I could just read it. Here we go. Let's see. But yeah, I was asked to go and to do a water ceremony for, come on, let's see if it will show. There it goes. For World Water Day. And World Water Day was declared by the UN back in 1993. And so this was on their website, and it kind of like, it was kind of sad, but it was like really touching at the same time. And this is what this says. One day in the forest, a fire broke out. All the animals ran for their lives. They stood at the edge of the blaze, looking at the flames in terror and sadness. Up above their heads, a hummingbird was flying back and forth to the fire over and over again. The bigger animals asked the hummingbird what she was doing. I'm flying to the lake to get water to help put out the fire. The animals laughed at her and said, you can't put out this fire. The hummingbird replied, I'm doing what I can. So that really kind of like made me cry. And there's times when I feel that the work that I do, it's like that, you know, I'm like running back and try to put out this fire. And also at that, you know, when I did that water ceremony, I always try to help people to connect emotionally with the water, you know, and the land. It's like, it is our relative. So how is it that you treat your relative? You know, you want to love, you want to nurture it, you want to take care of it, and for it to be like in the best way possible. And to have a reciprocal relationship with it, like, you know, one of my mentors, Robin Kimmerer, she talks about that. But, you know, I said, well, you know, like if your house was on fire, you would be like running, like, you know, running around trying to either try to put it out or grab your relatives and make sure that, but, you know, in the state of the world and the way that things are, people aren't looking at it like that with our land and our water, that we are in a state of emergency. So, and I myself, I try to be mindful in the way that I live. I don't drink bottled water. I try to be mindful of like when I, as a consumer, go and consume things, what am I doing? I don't own a car, kind of like not by choice, but I still don't own a car, and I carpool with people quite a bit, or I take the bus. I mean, those kinds of things. And for me, and one of my other mentors was Josephine Madame and Ba, who walked all the way around the Great Lakes with an eagle feather and a water pail. I was like, oh my gosh, I could like be like her in my everyday life, very humble. But at the same time, she did that, you know, and people like were gravitated towards her and helped her to do that. She was kind of like that hummingbird, you know, running back and forth to the fire, but she went ahead and she did it. And lots of people helped her, but she did it in a very humble way. But in her own life, she like lived that way. Like she really cared about the earth. And so I try to do that. And it's very like, I probably could go live in a teepee or in a wigwam or something like that, but it would be very hard for me like to exist. And somebody talked about systems and structures that have been imposed upon us. And so I think about that like quite a bit, that there's all these systems, whether it's the educational system, whether it's capitalism, whether it's, and capitalism is a big driver for many of these things that are happening for climate change in our communities. And it's always profits over people. And that is like, that to me is like, I at this point, I kind of feel like the hummingbird. I don't know what the solution is, but I keep trying. But I know that if my migration story is true, and that we migrated from the east, on the East Coast, there used to be clan mothers and, you know, women governance kind of bodies, women that were the ones that were the decision makers, not like in a patriarchal way that we in this society with the way that they think about it, but more or less like we would do it like kind of from an emotional, intuitive level. So that's my understanding of the way that, you know, what we as women bring to the table. We bring those things, and we are truly connected on the ground within our communities. We see, we feel, you know, the harms and those things that are happening in our community. So I'm like really grateful that all these women, and the one lady mentioned that she's a new mother, and she worries about what is this world going to look like for my grandchildren and her daughter. That's a real concern. So what I can do is, I'm the director of the Waters Life Festival, and I really try to draw in the young people. You know, I'm not going to be around here forever. I try to bring them in and like, you know what, here is the torch, here is the baton. I need for you to take this. I need you to run with it. I need for you to like take this up so that and at one of my gatherings, I did have, I think it was like 5 different youth that got up and talked. I said, you know, I'm so tired of hearing adults that kind of repeat the same things. I need to hear from them. And there's a lot of wisdom in the youth. And when they got up there and talked, none of them were nervous. I mean, they just like, they got it, you know, and I was so glad that I like had them to be the ones to speak that at that event at that time, because it's like, oh my God, they blew me away. You know, sometimes we don't give enough credit to kids. It's like, shh, be quiet, or you don't know what you're talking about or whatever. But I consistently try to engage them because they're the ones that, you know, come on, come with us and help us. You know, it's like, we really need you, and we're concerned. We want to hear your concerns. What is it that you're concerned about? What it is, the decisions that we're making today that are going to affect you. I want to know that, because that guides me in the things that I do, you know, decisions that I make in my everyday life, so that I am a good grandmother, auntie, and tribal citizen, and you know, community person. I get lots and lots of help from other women in my community. We do like a little community gathering. We do the grandmother moon ceremonies and things like that, which are like really super important in our communities to gather in that way. I have apathy. I have like those type of native people that are like the Indians at the fort, just there to see what they can, get out of the system. And part of that has to do with the colonialism that was brought here. But I still, just like the hummingbird, I like will keep going and getting water and trying to put out the fire. Through the Waters Life Festival, we have had several themes throughout the years of doing the Waters Life Festival. It's our 5th year. One was, excuse me, one was the eagle and condor prophecy, whereas the North and South America are going to get together and there's going to be a great healing. One year it was love for water. One year I had a panel of tribal people here in Michigan that are doing wild rice restoration. We are trying to get where wild rice is the state grain, so thereby it would be protected. So when people, rich folks have their homes, along the shore, they have to be mindful when they're boating and stuff. If we have, areas where we are doing wild rice restoration, I mean, all through the state of Michigan, there really used to be a lot more wild rice, but because of logging and industrialization and things like that, it's like that is like no more. So we're doing things like that. And then one year I had I participate in the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network, and those forever chemicals are like everywhere. And a lot of times I do feel like that hummingbird. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like we're basically screwed right now because this stuff is like everywhere. But I have come across feeds on, the internet stuff where they are doing research and trying to find ways that there's mushrooms or there's different things that in the environment that can absorb and take care of these chemicals. They're not quite there yet, but I know that this is the number one thing that is a threat to our water right now is this PFAS, because it's like everywhere. It's all over the world. And some of it is our own, habits as consumers, whether we purchase stuff in plastic containers or we wear, what is it called? That stuff like the water repellent stuff on our clothing, and many of our clothing and things that we wear are made out of synthetic materials, plastic. And even if you look at a Nike shoe, it's not leather anymore. I tried to go on eBay and try to buy a pair of leather shoes. You can't anymore. It's all that artificial, stuff. But so it's a quandary for me. How is it that I try to be, to advocate for Skaka McQuay and me be, but at the same time, I have to live in this society. So that's
absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. How do we live in society, which is the society that's producing all of these things, and also get off the system at the same time. So I totally get that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Janan, for your really important and comments and the wisdom that you have. And one way that I got to know Janan is through the Enbridge Pipeline 5. And we're going to go ahead and put that in the chat so people can really learn more about what's happening with Line 5, because it is a terrible project. And as Janan was saying, it's going under the Straits of Mackinac. And what we're looking at is, another pipeline that if it leaks, it will destroy the Great Lakes. And we're talking about 1/5 of the world's surface level fresh water being destroyed. And it's an extremely dangerous proposition by Enbridge. And we've also, bringing in Tara's comment, the incredible work of all the fighters along Line 3 and their recording of and monitoring of the damage that happened is horrible. And we're trying to make use of it now to show the Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA, and different agencies, that this is the same company playing by the same rule book. And we're not going to get a different result in terms of the disaster that Line 5 will be, having seen what took place with Line 3. So thank you, Janan, so much for your leadership in that in that struggle and your ongoing work with the Water is Life festivals. Thank you so much. And we've just got a few minutes left, but I wanted to just give everyone like a 3-minute wrap up. Everyone just, being able to hear each other and learn from one another. We could just start with you, Ariel, and go through each of the speakers and just give you a chance to reflect on each other or any closing comment you want, knowing that we're also here at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and anything you wanted to say before we close out. We could all have like a 3-minute closing period. Thank you. Go ahead, Ariel.
Thank you so much, Osprey, and to all the wonderful speakers that are sharing some of the plights and movements that are sort of being spearheaded by women across North America. I'm so honored to be here. I think for myself, what's really come clear to me is that we are living in a time of the resurgence of not just indigeneity and Indigenous peoples, but a resurgence of the matriarchies that existed pre-colonialism. And within that movement, we need to also talk about how, white feminism has also led to the degradation of the rights of Indigenous women with racist and sexist legislation that tried to rob Indigenous women of our rights. We are only now in the infancy of our people and our people as Indigenous women to see how we can step into our rightful roles as the leaders that we truly are. So we talk a lot about decolonization and land back and the movement to restore our lands and territories, but we also need to be talking about what it means to decolonize movements of feminisms and how we can ensure that our women are leading these movements sustainably and being recognized for our roles and responsibilities in our communities into the long term. Kim Anderson, an Indigenous feminist, has said that what we now call feminism, which the Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines as a theory of political, economic, and social equity of the sexes, was simply a way of life for our ancestors. And so we have to remember that what we talk about as women leading the way for our communities and Indigenous feminism is not a new ideological perspective. It is one that has always lived and existed within our communities. We need to be creating space and room for our women and the women and those that are most vulnerable to systems of colonialism, to systems of patriarchy, to systems of extractivism, to the systems that are driving climate change, to be upheld and given the resources that we need in order to continue driving the plights of our communities forward, to move towards equity and freedom for our communities, to help pave the way for new generations. As Tara stated, a lot of us here on this call are mothers, and I'm no exception. And part of that, and that I want to just share as like a wrap up, is that as mothers, we also talk about Mother Earth, and an attack on Mother Earth is an attack on our women. And when we talk about transformation, I always talk about how this transformation of intersectional movement buildings and all of the work that we're trying to do to restore the roles of matriarchy in our communities is not easy. We are constantly moving through these difficult times. And to me, it is so interesting to relate it to my own experiences of childbirth. As we move through the contractions of the movements that we are moving through for justice, it can be hard. Sometimes it can take our breath away. Sometimes it can feel like there's no end to it. But those contractions are leading and helping us to open up and expand ourselves so that we can birth something new. And the joys that we experience once we are able to allow our bodies to move into those difficult moments, as our bodies move and expand, and we allow ourselves to embrace the beauty of what it means to birth something new into the world, that is when we will see the rise of what's necessary to equalize and rebalance our relationships to the land, relationships with each other. That is when we will start to see the justice that we are all fighting for. Merci, Cho. Thank you. Hi.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ariel. Really, really, really powerful to hear those comments. Thank you so much. And I'll hand it to you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal.
Oh, thank you so much, Bilahuk. So I just want to echo what Ariel was saying. We need to move together in unity and uplift our women hear and stop tearing each other down. And also just gratitude of working together, gratitude of having this panel and letting us speak our truth to power. I appreciate what everybody has said on this panel, because in all of our walks of life, we have very different tribes, but we have very similar fights all across Turtle Island, United States, Mexico, Canada. We all have these similar fights, and just gratitude to be in relation with everybody here. And yeah, Pilahook and Alewa, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much. And thanks for reminding us of that unity. Really appreciate it. Tara, please go ahead. You have the floor.
First, I'll do this so you can see what I'm looking at.
Ah,
That's who's behind the scenes. We've stopped to get her some food. It was time. I deeply appreciate all of you. It's beautiful to see your faces and to hear your fights and hear your awesome wisdom. And yeah, just thank you so much for sharing.
you think you'll need more than
And
that? Is that or not?
all I would
Okay.
say, I think
This one's gonna have to run it back.
for closing thoughts is I strongly encourage folks to, if you're going to stand up and bring the voice of nature into these places, and you're going to stand up for your people and for what's right, I would encourage you to get out with nature and to spend that time. It will help you. It will sustain you. This work is very difficult and it is very draining. And if it weren't for my own constant attention to getting myself out into the woods and out into the forest, I would not be able to continue doing this work. So whether it's the prairie or the bayou or the mountains or the lakes or the rivers or the deserts, that critical connectivity, we have to know what we're fighting for. And nature is not idealistic, it's not romantic, it's tough and gritty and dirty, and it's awesome. It's so awesome. Yeah, I deeply appreciate all of you and all the love to all your fights, and always hold me in my heart. Miigwech.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for sharing your young one with us, and those good words remind us to take care of ourselves by being in the arms of Mother Earth and getting nurtured in that way. Thank you so much. Monique, please go ahead.
Sometimes I feel like reality is a bit of like a bad sci-fi story where I'm like, wait, they're going to take what and push it into the earth, and oh wait, they're taking tar sands and then they're going to ship it across and then it's going to go across the world, and we're going to there's war here and there's oil and gas, like in my backyard, and how our backyards are connected to these planetary systems. And I also have been thinking about, like, what if we identified ourselves by our water source? Like, I drink Mississippi River water every day or bathe in it. I am like Mississippi, like how that would change our framing of like what matters to us if we were really like, right. And relationships. I'm just so incredibly like, I know Ariel and Tara, I'm just meeting Janine and Crystal today, and I'm just like so inspired to know that you're out there in the world being you, doing you, and all of these other folks who are here on the call that, we're all working so hard in different ways, and how strengthening those networks makes us all stronger in our individual, what's in front of us. And I just want to direct folks to watch what's happening in St. James Parish, Rise St. James, Inclusive Louisiana, the Center for Constitutional Rights are going after the parish officials, which we have parishes here instead of counties, against the 13th and 14th Amendment violations and putting petrochemical plants in Black and Brown communities, and how we can't fight the individual corporation that, for land loss here in South Louisiana and all over did not begin with sea level rise, but really began with colonization and these corporate systems, and how we have to stop those systems from being able, because it's not one corporation, it's all of them. And so yeah, St. James Parish is here in Louisiana, and the fight that's happening there is really inspiring. So and the fight that all of you are doing where you all are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique. Really appreciate all your work and all the struggles that you're going through and what you're doing about it. Thank you so much. And Janan, just a few minutes, we're gonna give you the last few minutes here to close out. Thank you, Janan. You need to unmute. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah, Monique, thank you for mentioning that at the Waters Life Festival one year, I did have everybody talk about their water address. So that is the body of water that you're near. Like you really notice your environment, you notice like the changes, you see all the, you know, what birds reside over there and everything. It's very personal, like part of your homeland when you identify like your home. My address is 660 East Main Street. That's very specific, very, you know, yeah, that's how you identify where your home is. So yeah, my water address is the Little Traverse Bay Band, Little Traverse Bay, where my my tribe is adjacent to, and then also you know, Lake Michigan as well, where tribal fishermen where we go and do tribal fishing. Yeah, I encourage all these women to, like someone else was saying, to us, support each other. I myself, I cannot do this alone, and it really encourages me to hear all the work that you're doing. And then I know that in other parts of the world that you all are doing some of the same work, and you know, just like kind of like pushing a rock uphill sometimes, but I'm still doing it, you know. But yeah, if there's any way that I can help somebody or whatever, I am willing to do that, because I know it really does take a whole community to shift and to make things happen. But yeah, and it's really important to stay connected in my community, and they kind of help to lift me up as well. So thank you, Osprey and We Can, and all those people that are within the sound of my voice for listening and moving forward our voices. So Chimigwech Wingazen.
Thank you so much. And we're going to put in the chat the Indigenous Women's Treaty Alliance, which is a group of women from line 5 and line 3 fighting, continuing the fight with Enbridge. And we can put that in the chat for Janan there as well. I want to just close out by saying thank you all so much. Indigenous women, all their diversity, Two-Spirit are the future. That's all I'm going to say. This is where our future is. I encourage everyone to support their leadership. All of the speakers today have links, and we'll put them also online. And I just love you all. I support you all. This leadership is incredible. Thank you for joining us. And I'm also glad because this is a way we can also bring your voices here to a lot of women at the UN Permanent Forum who know you. You know, for those of you who don't know, these are all very prominent leaders in their community and are known globally. And so I'm really glad that we could bring your voices here, because I know people were asking after you. And so I'm just glad we could utilize this technology that is here and make it do something good for us. So thank you for taking your time, and wishing everyone well and a good rest of day. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.